afternoon, and welcome to our session, Retail Partner Opportunities Across the Value Chain. I'm Lindsay Berg. I'm a General Manager in Global Industry Product Marketing. I cover the industrials, retail, consumer goods, telecommunications, and energy. I'm excited today to talk to you first a little bit about the industry challenges that we are seeing in retail and the scenarios where we see the most opportunity for technology to support. I'm sure that all of you in this room are deeply familiar with the challenges facing retail today. At the top of the list is customer acquisition. Customer loyalty is increasingly a scarce commodity. It is too easy to switch. It is too easy to move. It is too easy to find another retailer who offers something at a slightly lower cost. Our customers across the retail value chain are looking at cost issues. They're looking at issues in every part of their wallets, and that's affecting all of our retailers. In addition, we do see that inflation is pushing shoppers to make choices that they would not previously have made, and impacting brand loyalty. Profitability and cost control. The problem that we have now is that since the global pandemic, the retention of talent is increasingly challenging. Getting workers, retaining those workers, training those workers on the increasingly complex policies and practices within a retail store, all of those things are driving costs. We also see margin pressure. Shoppers today are increasingly willing to choose a cheaper product solely based on cost instead of being driven by features or functionality. And finally, there's a huge emphasis on increasing our advertising spend and a really unclear ROI on what that advertising spend is getting us. We are spending into channels that we do not fully understand because the world is changing too fast for us to understand where our consumers have gone. Supply chain reliability is at the top of everyone's list, in particular when we think about things like geopolitical crises, differences in how we handle our political relationships with other countries, differences in how we handle movement of goods and services as people become increasingly attuned to the supply chain problems associated with sustainability. The issue that we have today where people look at having a container ship go with a raw material to one country to have that raw material processed, then say, for example, the fabric put on another container ship to move it back to yet another country to have it made into processed goods, and then have those goods moved back yet again on the container ship doesn't make sense. But we're doing it, and it's expensive, and more than that, it's impacting our planet. Finally, we're looking at siloed data. Data is probably the most valuable resource that a retailer has and the one that is the most difficult to access. The data exists in pockets, it exists in older systems and point of sale devices where it's not easy to access. It is not well correlated to other data systems, and half of it is unstructured, the data that you might be getting from social media. For a retailer today, the problem remains taking their customer and turning it into a single view. Right now, we have a customer in the store. We have a customer on social media. We have a customer who's making an online order. And some of our retailers are making enormous progress in finding ways to turn that 4 or 5 people, into a single individual so that they can track purchases and they can track preferences. But that means that people have to be willing to give us their information, and that is also increasingly a problem. We're also looking at consumer goods. You'll see that the challenges are similar and overlapping, but not identical. For CG, the biggest issue is brand. Brand is always the question for consumer goods. And as I described earlier, brand loyalty is diminishing in the face of cost pressure. The pressure on workforce is worse for consumer goods because they have to consider not only the retail environment, but also the factory floor, also the movement of goods across supply chains. And finally, meeting sustainability goals in consumer goods is increasingly an issue as our next generations of consumers care more, track more, pay more attention to the sustainability concerns of the goods that they use. We also obviously look at supply chain reliability in consumer goods, and it's worse when you have an entire value chain encompassed in a single product. So we look at retailers like Patagonia, we look at retailers like Gap, we look at retailers who are doing a wonderful job to think about the impact that they're having on the environment, but that does include knowing more about their supply chain than they've ever known before, and that in itself presents a challenge. So how is Microsoft thinking about these critical industries? When we talk to our partners, we talk about the Microsoft Cloud for retail, we talk about consumer goods, and to a lesser extent, the Microsoft Cloud for consumer goods. When we announced the Microsoft Cloud for retail some years ago, it was thought of as a product. I want you to think about the Microsoft Cloud for retail as a grouping of solutions. We look left to right across the Microsoft portfolio and consider where Microsoft technologies can have the most impact on the problems that I just described. We divide them into 4 groupings. We look at transforming the shopper journey, which means thinking creatively about how we can have better customer experiences using the data that we are able to locate, but also thinking more creatively about how technology can support an in-store experience. Looking at creating an agile and sustainable supply chain, again, based on data, taking advantage of AI. Empowering our retail workforce, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, and unlocking the potential of the data that is hiding in all of our systems. For consumer goods, we highlight building brands people love. We look at the design and production of next generation products, and this overlaps with the work that we do in manufacturing, looking across the value chain at how we design, build, and operate or service products. Creation of an agile and sustainable supply chain, and then finally, the optimization of channels and the global routes to market that we take. Where are products manufactured? Where are they sold? Where is the most consumer interest? And how can I drive brand loyalty across geopolitical boundaries? I want to talk a little bit more about empowering the retail workforce of the future, because this is the area where we've made the most changes as we came into this year. We believe that moving forward, we can address more personas in retail based on AI than we have historically ever been able to address. I haven't talked a lot about AI in this presentation so far, but it really is at the foundation of everything that we're doing. Historically, it has been enormously difficult for retailers to find a reason to eliminate the data silos. You have a theoretical justification that if you were able to do better analytics, the data might be more useful. Today, with generative AI, I can guarantee that someone without any training whatsoever can get value out of data if I can break down the silos. This is nowhere more apparent than in our stores. I can take people without training, and if you can wire the right data sources into an agent, someone can access thousands of pages of documentation so that my store associates with minimal training can find out what is the policy on returns. They can look up order status. They can identify problems for customers. They can look at previous orders. There's a whole future that we think is going to operate in store, beginning with empowering that store associate with generative AI tools on a mobile device based on wiring in data that already exists and we already know to be reliable. Merchandising, buying, and planning is another area where we're going to be looking at applying AI rigorously. The ability to plan more carefully around seasonal transitions, around what's available in the supply chain, around the shifting preferences of consumers, and frankly, around cost. Again, these are problems that AI can help solve, looking at data more closely without the need to bring in data scientists. Supply chain forecasting and predictability is advancing faster than almost any other area because we're used to forecasting a supply chain. The data already exists. It's simply a matter of the fact that it's easier to analyze. And so we've had some of our partners talking about how they went from 80% reliability in their forecasting all the way to 90%. It's making a difference in having the right goods, the right selection on the shelves, and then you're going to see improved margins for our retailers. And finally, our marketing managers, and we're going to talk a lot about this later on in this presentation. But the ability for a marketer to more easily access data using AI tools, we do think is going to be transformative. As a marketer myself, I am already stunned at how much easier parts of my job are becoming because of the fact that I don't have to do repetitive tasks. I can sort of focus my creativity on core problems. The next thing we'd like to do is to talk to you a little bit more about partner business value and how the adoption of AI can be made easier with some of the programs and tools that we offer. And then we're going to ask some of our partners to come up here and talk to you a little bit about their experiences working with Microsoft. But first, I'd like to introduce Sue McMahon to talk about our partner programs.
Thank you, Lindsay. And welcome, everybody. We're glad you carved some time out of your day to be here with us today, and we're thrilled to be able to deliver this content and have partners here with us to underscore the importance of it. So I'm going to dig right in. So let's start with the customer, all of our customers, the retail and consumer goods companies that we serve with technology tools. What McKinsey is telling us is that there's a $660 billion opportunity based on their increased spend on AI over the coming years. And for the the customer, there's a $310 billion business value out of it, particularly in areas like marketing and customer service. And then finally, this productivity improvement looks small as a percentage, but when you think about, especially in retail, we employ the largest workforce on the planet. So a 1% to 2% productivity savings is massive and will drive so much profitability into the business. And also, with AI, do it with delivering better outcomes and better service to the customer. This is some research that IDC recently did, that Microsoft commissioned, where they talked to our partners, all of you, and uncovered the revenue multiplier that partners are seeing with Microsoft AI solutions and Microsoft platforms. For every dollar of revenue Microsoft generates, our services-led partners generate $8.50, and our software-led partners almost $11. And this is just the beginning of how AI solutions are going to impact this multiplier. So this should rev up very, very quickly based on that. Also in the same survey, partners are bullish on AI. You all believe, and you expect to do more by about a 39%, 40% margin with Microsoft AI services in order to deliver the revenue and the profit growth you know that exists from these tools. So we thank you. And so I like to call this slide the choose your own journey slide. These are some of the things you've been hearing about all week long. It's our AI and Copilot platform services and tools. But you get to choose as the partner, as the end customer. Do you want to use low-code AI tools like Azure, my Copilot Studio, excuse me. Do you want to do more pro development in Azure AI Studio and Azure OpenAI Service? And finally, the underpinnings of it all is Microsoft Fabric, which we consider the data platform for the era of AI, and brings so much benefit by bringing everything together into the one-lake architecture. So let's now talk a little more about the customer and where we're seeing customers get significant business value already out of the gate using Microsoft AI tools. This is kind of an overview, again, an IDC report of the use cases that they're hearing from customers about that are the emerging, very tactical use cases where retailers see that they'll not only get the most ROI, but they'll also be willing to invest the most in. You see things on here like workforce empowerment, fraud detection and protection, product search and recommendations, et cetera. So already we see retailers tipping their toe into the water in these kinds of capabilities. And so let me share some actual examples. One of the first I like to always start with is CarMax. They were very, very early adopters of Azure OpenAI Service, and they used it to take user-generated content, product reviews for the tens of thousands of cars that are in their lots and on their website and in their app, and really personalize the kind of descriptions that those products had in the website. So let me just share with you their words.
Car buying is a big decision. It's the second largest thing a person will do after buying a home. CarMax disrupted the industry by bringing honesty. We have tens of thousands of cars on our website or through our app. And without talking to a human being, customers can get overwhelmed.
The challenge that we had was that we only could create so much content. There's manual effort, there's research, the writing, there's the proofreading.
Our writers can only produce so much content a month. It would have taken them years to produce enough pages to be relevant.
Azure OpenAI Service allows us to summarize all of the custom reviews and put it in a simple to read and understandable sentence.
We're able to take content and feedback from a lot of other customers, curate it, and create this very tailored content for a specific car.
Through the fine-tuning process, we're at 80% of the content goes through without a human needing to be involved. We're estimating an individual would take 11 years to do what OpenAI Service has done in days. We have seen a significant increase in our search engine optimization.
Now, the editorial team, they're able to focus their time on the areas most beneficial to the company and to our customers. There's so much possibility with OpenAI Service. We're innovating at a scale, at a pace like never before. It's going to change everything we do.
So a very, very early win as a public reference for Microsoft and for CarMax. Another case study is around Tractor Supply. You may know them. They operate stores in rural and quasi-rural areas. The real farmers and the gentleman farmers that may have relocated during the pandemic that fancy themselves as farmers, but their business has grown significantly coming out of the pandemic and during the pandemic as well. They had created a tool, just a machine learning tool called 𝗲𝗲. It stands for greet, understand, recommend, and act. What they did was they rebuilt it using Azure OpenAI and Copilot Studio and made it into a Gen AI infused tool that has natural language at the fingertips of the associate on the floor who's in front of the customer and can really bring to life that selling process they've laid out. Hal Lawton is their CEO. He said, it became a huge, almost immediate win with the team. So there's definitely the adoption rate of generative AI tools is much more rapid because consumers are using them as consumer tools as well, and associates on the sales floor immediately understand how to pick them up and use them in a productive way. And then finally, Albert Heijn, the largest grocer in the Netherlands, a division of Ahold Delhaize, they had two objectives with AI and generative AI. One was to allow their consumers to have a better experience around recipes and ingredients and all those types of things, and then using more traditional AI to be able to predict when food would spoil and start to apply discounts in a runway that would allow them to sell through product and not have to dispose as much of it after it passed its expiration date. So those are just a couple of other examples that we've seen. We wanted to kind of whet your appetite for the use cases that Microsoft is seeing in retail and consumer goods, and happy to have further conversations on others if anyone's interested. So now, very exciting. I'd like to call up our panelists for our fireside chat. Lindsay's joining us again. And we're not going to take a lot of time to do introductions, but here are our panelists, and Lindsay's going to facilitate some Q&A with us.
Thanks so much, Sue.
Welcome.
So we always believe that the easiest way to believe that Microsoft is on the right track is if we have partners joining us. There is nothing more important than having our ecosystem alongside us, especially in a moment of transition as significant as this one. So I'm thrilled today to welcome Kathie Johnson with Sitecore and also 𝗲𝗲𝗀𝗻 with Avanade to talk a little bit more, Accenture, sorry. Avanade, got it right the first time. Moment of panic. I'm thrilled to welcome them to talk a little bit more about their experiences working with Microsoft and also, again, in this moment of change for AI for their own companies and how they're seeing us bringing retail forward. Where I'd like to start is actually, Kathie, if you could talk a little bit. I mentioned earlier that the marketing persona we think is an area of huge opportunity. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about how Sitecore has been integrating AI into that marketing persona work so far?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all for sticking out last day. Great to see you all here. As Lindsay mentioned, I am at Sitecore. If you don't know Sitecore, I hope you do, but we are a digital experience platform that ranges everything from content to experience, also including commerce. When it comes to AI, just last month, actually, we launched something called Sitecore Stream. What we did is we worked with marketers to develop a generative AI solution for marketers all across the entire content and experience platform that we have. So think of it as an add-on offering that allows marketers to really manage that workflow. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, in a bit. But everything through brand-aware AI to AI-enhanced workflows. Marketing is a team sport, lots of players involved, to co-pilots. And all of this was developed alongside on Microsoft.
Thank you so much, Kathie. Roy, where we wanted to start with you was Avanade really has been at the forefront of AI adoption working with Microsoft. We have some key findings from the incisive research that we've just discussed. Yeah. When you look at those research findings, how are they shaping our collective approach? How are you thinking about the research that you're seeing in market today?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there's some fantastic insights, I think, in the work that we've done, and most importantly around the marketing, which I think is a segment that we haven't really explored in terms of AI and the adoption of AI there. The three big themes that we're seeing, or the ones that really jump out of the page for me, is, first of all, there's this kind of AI gap. Mm-hmm. And I think we've heard that across the conference, and I think we're hearing it directly from our clients, which is, while there's been a rush to, kind of use AI and adopt AI in companies, it's still very much at a sort of experimental stage. And what we've seen is that, and you'll see it in the report, that only 12% of companies actually feel fully prepared to scale AI across their organization.
Right.
So there's this big gap in terms of kind of experimentation now and actually how they're going to scale that across the organization. So that's a big theme that we're seeing and we're hearing from our clients as well. The second theme is really around the standardization of tools and the application and usages of AI across the business. 76% of the people that we interviewed feel just totally overwhelmed about the choices that they've got in terms of the tools, in terms of how they apply AI across the organization. And we're feeling, again, if you ladder that back up to this sort of AI gap, that's producing almost like a paralysis in the organization, which is like, which tools do I choose, how do I do it, and where do I do it?
Right.
So that's a big theme as well. And I think the last theme is very much kind of in the human context, and that's really around what we're sort of calling kind of augmenting intelligence. And so what we're seeing is kind of this, there's a clear role, thank God, for humans still in the organization and in marketing. And in fact, 74% of the people that we surveyed said, around sort of strategy, creative origination, and creative development, humans are irreplaceable. But the role that AI can play in that is actually augmenting our intelligence rather than actually replacing it. So there's some really big opportunities there from the data that we've seen and from what we've been hearing from clients in the market.
Absolutely. Sue, I wonder, you've also looked deeply at the incisive research. Were there trends that you saw that really stuck out to you in terms of the challenges that retailers are facing?
Yeah, and I think Roy covered them very well, but I think the first and foremost is data security and compliance. More than ever before, retailers have vast amounts of data with generative AI because now unstructured data comes into the mix. And it's very concerning to have the right level of governance. What does that look like? And how can I protect the data that I have? And how can I be compliant with regulatory issues around the world?
Yeah, and I think the two of you have really hit on the critical issues, which is, first of all, the problem is too large. And second of all, people don't feel equipped to handle that problem. And finally, when they do feel equipped to handle that problem, you have to worry about governance and compliance.
Yes.
One of the things I love about the work that Sitecore is doing is I feel that you've taken a really nicely defined set of the AI problems, and you're approaching it in a way that's really sort of doable for a company to consume. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how you're thinking about AI across the different marketing functions and again, making that possible for customers to get started?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anyone who has worked with any marketing organization knows it's truly a team sport, right? There are so many different roles within the marketing organization. So when you think about it, collaboration, coordination are so critical. In addition, you showed all those statistics around the importance of brand. And one of the things that's so important for a marketing organization is to ensure that their brand is consistent in market at all times. So again, going back to working with marketers, for marketers, we really looked at what are the biggest pain points that marketers are dealing with as it pertains to content and experience or delivery across websites, TikTok, and everything else. And really looked at how do you manage your brand consistently, right? So really built in that ability to ingest your brand right into Sitecore Stream through brand kits. Secondly, how do you manage that entire flow from ideation of a campaign all the way through to insights? So think about the brand piece, the campaign piece, the content piece, the delivery piece across all those channels, and then that insights and learning. And so really orchestrated that full workflow and put co-pilots all along the way. So again, how do you help humans to do the best work they can do to represent the brand the best way they can and create that differentiation and help grow the business?
So really a question of looking at work that people are already doing and deeply understanding the natural flow of the process and then saying, where are the places where we could accelerate this or simplify it?
Absolutely.
That makes sense to me. I think that, one of the things I love about the work that Sitecore is doing is you do have great starting places for your customers. So can you give me an example of, if you're going in to work with a new customer, where you would begin?
Sure. I can share a customer story.
That would be fantastic.
Okay, great. So one of the things, I'll tell you, I'm a marketer, so I kind of geek out about this because when you get to help develop technology for your own persona, it's really a cool place to be. But we worked hand in hand with Microsoft, but also hand in hand with Nestle. And think about Nestle, you've probably heard of them, right? They have 1,800 brands, they have 15,000 marketers, they're in 185 countries, and every marketer is dealing with 50 documents around brand and content and campaigns at any moment in time. And so really worked hand in hand with them to help them figure out how do you manage that brand and category knowledge That's how we came up with the brand kits. That's how we came up with the brand assistants and the brand co-pilot, leveraging the Microsoft technology. And if you listen to 𝗦𝗲𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀, who's the global CMO of Nestle, what she'll say is that this is the future of content operations. It ensures that every marketer in every country and every agency, because marketers work with tons of agencies as well, are all using the same materials and ensuring that brand is consistent in market. So I think that's a great example and a great place to start. It's the very foundational level, ensuring your brand is consistent everywhere you are.
So Roy, I mentioned earlier that we think of this as an ecosystem problem, and obviously the work that Sitecore is doing is really, very forward thinking. How do you think about the role that Avanade plays in this ecosystem and supporting other partners, like working with Microsoft or supporting other partners to have this strategic advantage?
Yeah, well, I think it's multidimensional in many ways, and obviously we've had a very long-standing partnership with Sitecore for 15 years plus, and 25 years almost with Microsoft as well. I think one thing for us, certainly with Sitecore and our partnership there, is we're kind of client zero. So, we are the first adopters of a lot of the technologies that Sitecore will release. So we're on XM Cloud, the latest, the kind of latest cloud product they've got around experiences. We're on Content Hub, and we will be one of the first clients to come onto Stream, which is their new AI product. So, it's really kind of, understanding the product through actually the development of it and that partnership with it. I think around the kind of alignment around the businesses, that really helps as well. So first of all, strategic alignment. So we've got a very clear view of the customers that we want to approach and go after. We're very focused on the mid-market specifically, and in key industries like CPG, retail, like manufacturing, and like healthcare here in the US. So clear alignment around the strategy. Also clear alignment around the business. So we've got a very shared view of kind of what success looks like collectively together, and how we go to market and what that looks like. And I think in the sort of last sort of space, and I think probably the most important space, is around kind of co-creation and innovation together. And this is also a lot of work we do with Microsoft. So innovate together. And Kathie mentioned sort of the AI products in Sitecore Stream. At Symposium just a couple of months ago, we worked hand in hand with the product team to bring that to life through a couple of demos that we created actually specifically for Symposium. Now the product's not ready and live and baked and ready to go. So we worked hand in hand to actually, how can we bring that to life for customers at the show so they can actually see this product in action, although you can't actually buy the product right now. So it's working in tandem with that, I think, and then taking that to market and taking that to our customers.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate about it is I think this alignment on the problems that we're trying to solve is the thing that's making the biggest difference. Because again, looking back at the earlier part of this conversation, the sort of the surface area is too broad if you don't have alignment with a group of people on where are we going to find that strategic alignment and where are we going to find that starting place. Sue, I'd love, you talked a little bit about the governance issue. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about the data privacy and security as concerns, and how does Microsoft ensure that we manage regulatory compliance as we take these kinds of steps forward with our industry?
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. That's a great question. I'd love to double down on that. The first thing with Microsoft, as far as data privacy goes, we're very, very clear to all of our customers, your data is your data. We don't have access to it. We don't use it to train our models. We don't use prompts that we use within our AI products to train the models. We're very specific about that, and we also don't share that data with any partners or anybody else. So that's the first thing that you should know. Secondarily, from a regulatory compliance perspective, we've built out a compliance structure around all the Microsoft products that is compliant with all of the various regulations around the world, both from our own use in dealing in other countries, but also for our customers. So that's something you can count on us for too. We've also built into the generative AI tools this copyright infringement guarantee. So if you're using Copilot Studio or you're using Azure OpenAI Service and you've deployed it as recommended with all the built-in switches flipped, and there's an issue with an image or a copy, we will actually defend against that on your behalf. We'll also pay any fines that you might incur on behalf of that. We're so confident about that walled garden in that regard.
That's fantastic. I'm going to go a little bit out of order. Kathie, I actually wanted to ask you, when you were working with Nestle, did security and governance come up as a topic? Was that something that your customers are concerned about?
Yeah, absolutely. With Nestle, with the other customers we're working with, and I even held a CMO dinner last week in Chicago, and it was top of mind. And it's really in two ways. One, exactly what you were talking about, which is one of the reasons we work with Microsoft, is ensure that, and this is a commitment we have, we will not use any of your data to train our models. The second piece is, and think about, in retail and consumer goods, it's important. It's also incredibly important in regulated industries, is you have to have that language perfection, right? And having those brand kits and that ingestion of the brand right into the technology, right into Sitecore Stream, really helps assure that you're using the right language everywhere, in every country that's required. Which is the other piece of the privacy that's so important.
Right, so that consistency is actually good for regulatory reasons as well as brand consistency.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Roy, the report also talks about the importance of training AI to understand brand voice. How does Avanade think about that training of an AI model or training of AI in general?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think we've seen this again across the board quite a lot, is that you've got to have a really clear vision in terms of how you want to apply AI across the organization. And that's got to really clearly ladder back up to the corporate strategy. It's got to be baked into, what does the business want to achieve? Is it revenue growth? Is it optimization? Is it productivity enhancements? So you've got to be super clear, first of all, about what is it going to deliver to the organization at a corporate level. Right. Then I think the layer down from that is actually what problem am I solving today for the marketer? Is it that I want a brand assistant that's going to help me kind of find the information that I need so I can put in various prompts and gives it to me? Or do I want to create new content from the kind of ingestion of that material? So be really clear about what is a use case and what's the outcome that's coming down to the marketer and how that links back up to the corporate strategy. And then I think the next layer down from there is really then just being really pragmatic about how you go off and deploy that. So, you've got to have machine-readable brand guidelines. Right. You've got to teach the NLP or the kind of machine learning around the kind of content and the creation of content and what that looks like. So you've got to go into really pragmatic levels with that. And then you've got to test. Don't try and boil the ocean. Don't try and do big bang stuff. Just go and test. Look at one market, one problem, one product, one service, whatever it might be. Make sure that that's right. Then start to roll that out. So just take a really pragmatic approach to it, making sure it ladders up to a bigger corporate vision. Right. And then it's kind of delivered in the organization. And I think the last point I'd add is then, don't build this stuff and think people are going to kind of go and use it. Co-create where you can. Build it with the users who are going to use the system so that it drives adoption. And then also think about the change management that the business really requires. You're going to be changing processes. You're going to be changing the way that people work. So how are you making sure that across that journey, you're baking in the change management programs? Right, and change management is obviously something that Avanade has been known for, for a couple of decades. And that idea that you build things carefully from the ground up so that the foundation you're working on is solid, that really makes a lot of sense. Sue, when you think about the future of AI in retail or consumer goods, given all of these considerations about making sure that we build carefully and that we build for the future, how do you think about the future and augmented intelligence and how it might help creativity in retail?
Yeah, and I think also the whole concept of keeping the human in the loop, not trying to replace anyone, trying to give people more meaningful work and take away the drudgery and the dull, dirty, and dangerous work that we've asked them to do historically for decades. How do we bring AI tools? We heard a lot about at this conference about agents. How do we create these agents that are specialists in certain parts of our business and process and process flow, and then orchestrate them with an LLM that can call on the right expert at the right time to get the right answer for that person that needs the answer to make the decision. So I think that's the future of what we're going to see. I think in addition to marketing use cases, there are a couple of others that are really kind of leaping off the page, both in our discussions with retailers and also in what we're seeing. One is just this magical thing that's now happening where I'm an associate in a store and someone that ran stores for 12 years for Macy's. This is very dear to my heart. I need to do a process. I need to answer a question for a customer. I need to process an RTV. I need to take a return. I don't know what the rules are. Typically, there's an enormous repository of information that's all unstructured data in PDF files and other things, or it's printed in a book at the register that's this thick. With generative AI, you ask the question in a few words in natural language, and it will give you a step-by-step guide of you need to do what you're supposed to do. And it's going to be 90% accurate. There's so much, tribal knowledge in retail, and people do things a different way, causes a different customer experience. So there's really tremendous value there, too, that we're starting to see materialize.
Yeah. Kathie, what about you? Where do you think, how is AI going to transform our marketing work over the next few years?
Tremendously. I said this the other day on stage, but I'm old enough to remember when the internet became a thing. And I worked for a company at that time who had been in business for over 30 years, and the internet became possible. And I was like, I want to build a website. And everybody was saying, too scary, too risky, it's a fad, don't do it. And I locked arms with the head of IT and said, let's just build this. And just think for a moment today, the company you work at, if you didn't have a website today, would you be in business? And I think the change that we'll see with Gen AI is going to be, you better not be laughing about my age over there. See you chuckling. Oh, okay, well, great, that's fantastic. But I think Gen AI is gonna have the same impact. And years later, we'll be looking back and seeing the companies that didn't embrace it, not being as competitive, not being as effective, not being as efficient in markets. So I think every individual and every company needs to just latch arms and recognize, and I know this adage is old, but I don't believe in marketing will be replaced by AI, but the people who know Gen AI will replace those who do not. And I think that that's what we will see for sure.
And I'll say from my own experience as a Microsoft employee, when they first put Copilot into Teams, why? And then I discovered it took notes in meetings. And then I discovered not only did it take notes, it took really good notes, it summarized those notes. And the amount of time that we are now saving just based on that one feature, I think made all of us feel a lot more comfortable with the idea that, in fact, there was repetitive, dull work that could easily be replaced. The fact that I no longer have to have someone on the call sitting and taking notes, I think is a huge advance, right there. And of course you have to check them. I mean, that's, there's always an issue of tone or substance. But that's the kind of example for me that shows how foundational this change is gonna be. Before we wrap up, we have a few minutes. I would love to hear final thoughts, starting certainly with you, Roy, on how do you think about this change for AI, and how do you think about helping people get started and prepare?
Yeah, well, I was fascinated with the keynote on Tuesday from Satya, and I thought the expression around Copilot being the UI for AI was really clever, because in this sort of agentic world that we're going to get into, it's actually who's going to be the coordinator across that, and having an interface that enables you to have multiple agents out there, and if for a single kind of UI, I think is going to help address a lot of the problems that we've seen already in terms of this gap of adoption. So I think that is going to be kind of the next thing from what I can see in the marketplace, for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. Sue?
Yeah, something that I heard in the keynote, which made me stop and think, was 𝗦𝗲𝘀𝗀𝗲𝗏, who said, if you think that your employees aren't using AI to perform their jobs today, or generative AI, you should think again, because they are. They're using consumer-facing tools, and sometimes they're even allowing those tools to ingest proprietary data and information. I've seen many, many examples of it. So it's something we really need to think hard and fast about from a data protection and a privacy and a compliance perspective, because you certainly don't want to see your internal data being used to train consumer-facing AIs. So I think that's something that companies are going to come to the grips with very quickly, and they're going to need to. And I think that will also help drive along adoption of corporate AI tools.
Yeah, I think for me it's very similar to the move to the cloud. I've been at Microsoft for a long time, and there was a stage where we had customers telling us that absolutely there was no cloud being used at their organization. That was simply not happening. And all of them had SaaS usage.
Yes.
All of them had employees who were using SaaS services that they weren't aware of for corporate purposes. So I do think it's the same kind of thing where, if you really don't want it being used, you're going to have to go looking, because it's too convenient and too easy and too hard to prevent.
Yes.
Unless you're really willing to get in there and give people the tools that they're asking for to do their jobs. Kathie, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think two comments. One is each one of us has that responsibility to make sure we're using it every day and learning, and it's not something you outsource to your teams. And then secondly, I'll just share I always think about what's the worst thing that could happen, and one of the things as a marketer I worry a little bit about is, are we going to reach the stage where other competitors are starting to train AI against my own company? And so I've been thinking a lot about, as an organization, how do we continue to train these AIs? How do we think about driving traffic to our websites when people are using Gen AI and not Google search anymore? So just a lot of thoughts around that too, around how do we protect our company brand in a world when there's so much unknown still today.
Absolutely.
But we need to stay on top of that.
Yeah, and that really is a fascinating question. The ability to distinguish things that are real from things that are not, I think, is becoming increasingly important. I'd like to share with you, this is the QR code for the incisive research that we've been referencing in this content, if people would like to have a look at it. So love to share the research with you. I'd also like to say thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everyone joining us online as well. When we say partners make more possible, I would say partners make everything possible. And as we go to market in this sort of complicated time, we wanted to give an example of this tremendous partnership that we have working with Avanade and working with Sitecore, where we tackled a shared problem together. Sue is going to give you some more information on programs that are going to help you join with us as we move forward. But I did want to say thank you so much to all of you for joining us today and for continuing to have this conversation with Microsoft about how we are going to shape the future.
Thank you. And before I proceed, did everybody get the QR code scan that wanted it? Good, okay. So just quickly to wrap up, I think you all know this because you've experienced it, but Microsoft goes out of our way to invest in our partners' success with skilling, differentiation programs, go-to-market programs, and other offerings to help you accelerate cloud and AI with our customers. You'll see a number of websites here along the bottom of each of these categories, but just if you go to partner.microsoft.com, you'll be able to find all these resources. There's a lot of great content, information, resources, assets for you to use to drive your business forward with Microsoft, with our customers. And I'll echo Lindsay and say thank you all so much for taking time today to be with us. We're honored to be here to convey this information to you. And let's get out there and empower some companies with AI.
And thank you so much, Roy and Kathie, for joining us
Yes,
today.
yes.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Stay
having
safe.
us.
I hear it's a little less.
Yes.